Alright, so welcome back to another review. This time, we're taking a look at the SV023. I know it's been a while since my last review, but I figured we'd take a look at these one more time, and this time we'll compare them to my babies, my one and only HD600s. And then I figured, well, kind of a similar price range, may as well throw in the HiFiMAN Sundara into the mix. Now, I understand the price of the HD600 nowadays is not that close to the SV023. I do. But whatever, this isn't just an analysis of technical capabilities, it's also about the sound signature, the comfort, the build, etc. So, thanks for swinging by, you know the deal, like, comment, subscribe. Let's not waste any more time, let's get right into it. So starting off with the 23s, that's what I'm going to nickname these. These come with a decent looking box, and if you recall, an absolutely thick case. Let me bring it on screen. I mean, just look at this thing. You just want to give it a good old smack, you know what I'm saying? And look at this thing. I mean, listen, I promise this case hits the gym more than you do. Now you also get a little pouch in there, and within that pouch is this particular cable right here. And really, I mean, just one of the best stock cables I have ever seen. So on one end you get the tip sleeve connectors here, labeled left and right respectively. Now this cable does terminate in Pentagon. You get an adapter that goes from Pentagon to 3.5 tip ring sleeve. That's about it. I mean, pretty generous if you ask me. Now as for the HD600s, these are the OG Marble Edition that came with a much nicer box, which I still use for display purposes. Now inside you get these headphones, the simple yet perfect cable, and yes, I still think that to this day, the 3.5mm to 1/4 inch adapter, and the manual itself. Last, the Sundaras feature a simple box with the Sundara on it and some branding. Nothing crazy, but it gets the job done. Within, you get this stock cable, which is by far the worst out of the three contenders, and a 3.5mm to 1/4 inch adapter, which is not seen on screen, but it does exist. It comes with it. So let's talk about build quality. Starting off with the 23s, I'm actually really impressed with these. The vast majority of the headphone is metal, just straight up. The bungee strap's leather feels good, and soft in a very, very good way, but mediocre in terms of quality. Just not absolutely astonishing, but it's good enough. It's pretty good. Now these cups feature a walnut housing with some metal grills. And the pads are weird, should we say. First off, they feature a unique shape where the bottom of the pads are comparatively thicker than the top of the pads. They feature a sort of hybrid design where the outer portions are a fenestrated leather design while the inner portion is a mostly smooth velour. HD600s. As we know, the HD600 are both plastic and metal. The only metal here is in the bridges between the headband and the cups themselves, the grills, and the drivers. The rest is a pretty, robust, solid feeling plastic. Now, as far as we've seen across the 20 plus years that these have been around, they're definitely built to last. We'll see about the new HD600's design durability as time goes by, though. I've got a decent feeling about it, but I definitely feel that these will probably last you just a bit longer. Last, the Sundaras are mostly metal, and while some people have mentioned that their drivers have stopped working after a while, I have yet to encounter any of those issues quite yet. Now let's go ahead and talk about comfort. Starting with the HD600, you all know that these are basically my benchmark for comfort. To me, they're the perfect amount of clamp force, the perfect cup size, giggity, the perfect amount of bulge outwards, giggity once again. You can even walk around with these because they won't really shift if you look down or move erratically. If anything, it does clamp around the bottom portion of your head a little too hard. It'd be ideal if it could distribute some of that towards the upper temple area instead. Now as for the 23s, they're actually very well designed when it comes to comfort. It's that bungee design, so you know the weight will be well distributed across your head. The pads definitely feel plush and nice to the touch, though you can feel the difference in thickness between the thickest part and the thinnest part. As for the clamp force, it's nice if you plan on sitting at a desk. I wouldn't say they feel like they'll fall off instantly, but it definitely wouldn't be comfortable to just walk around with these, look up, look down, do chores around the house, stuff like that either. I'd say they'd beat the HD600 if Sivga would just increase the clamp force on these just a bit. Now, the Sundaras also feature a very close to the head design that feels very, very comfortable to me. Now keep in mind, I got smaller ears, so they do fit within the pads. I understand a lot of people don't like the slightly more aggressive clamp force on these, but I personally do. These are not exactly the most lightweight headphone, but because of that clamp force, they feel very secure on your head. If it wasn't because of that, they would definitely be shifting off and doing this and that, and they'd feel a lot worse than they may now. The soft pads are able to get a good seal on my head, despite my slightly thicker frames on my Ray-Ban Clubmasters, which have been my glasses for the longest of time until I got these bad boys in, don't mind the dirtiness, the Dita Flight 006, which I then turned into eyeglasses. That's right, Tony Stark, baby. Now let's discuss a little bit of amplification. HD600s, you know that these aren't that hard to drive nowadays. However, they definitely scale well with higher output amplifiers and tube amps. On my THX AAA 789, I run these single-ended at around 11 o'clock, maybe up to 11:30 with the gain set to 2. Running them balanced, I get these up to 10:30, maybe 11 with gain set to 1. As for the 23s, I ran these on single-ended at around 11 a.m. on gain 2. As for balanced, I will no longer have a balanced amplifier with a Pentagon entry, so these will not be tested using balanced. And for the record, neither will the HD600s nor the Sundaras for the sake of this test, which brings us to the next portion here. With the Sundaras, I ran these on single-ended at around 12, which is noon, on gain 2. As for balanced, I ran them at around 11:30 a.m. on gain 1. And now the moment you've all been waiting for, the sound portion. So before we begin, the usual disclosure. No EQ nor mods will be applied to the following tests. All impressions will be in stock form using single-ended. Let's begin with the bass. For starters, let's talk about that sub-bass extension, right? The HD600s are the sore loser in this category, straight up, since as we know, they basically have no sub-bass extension. Now the 23s are in second place. For a dynamic driver, they do have some pretty decent sub-bass extension. You can feel the rumble of the notes and a bit more of that warmth as well. The Sundaras are undoubtedly the best in extension, as can be expected from planar magnetic headphones. They don't blow your ears out with like oodles of sub-bass either. They're not going to be a Basshead's, wet dream or anything. But they don't under-deliver either. They give you a lot of presence and bang for your buck. Of course, you can add some more with EQ, and they do respond very well to some EQ, so EQ that sub-bass up if you want more. But again, we're talking about stock signature here, so to each their own. Now, when it comes to bass guitars, the HD600 are definitely the wooliest of the bunch, while the 23s are actually the most textured out of the three. Now, the Sundaras keep the bass guitar back a little bit, but they still show some excellent texture. The 23s definitely brings it to the forefront a little bit by comparison. As for slam with items like kick drums, the Sundaras stand out and are the undoubted winner in this category. The amount of slam they offer it's unmatched by these two, and they sound the cleanest and the clearest of the bunch in the low end as well. This time, the HD600 take second place. They're next in terms of cleanliness and slam, though the 23rd are definitely not far behind. I don't mean this to say that they are lacking in any way. Finally, for electronic bass, the Sundaras take the cake, being a planar magnetic driver. However, I will let you know that the 23s are not far behind. They offer plenty of sub-bass presence and a good amount of slam and rumble. While the HD600s offer enough slam for my tastes, it is painfully clear that these drivers are simply not the clearest, and most detailed on the market anymore. Overall, the Sundaras take the cake for the bass category. They offer plenty of sub-bass and mid-bass presence for those who prefer a cleaner sound, and can be EQ'd in a way to have more bass and respond very, very well to that. Definitely do not take it too far. Now let's talk about the mids here. With male vocals, the Sundaras bring them forward the most. However, they tend to intensify most sounds. In my experience, planars they tend to just wow you with the power, with the action and the punch, which can be a pro, but can also be a con in certain tracks. This means that while mids are very discernible and forward, so is basically everything else. The HD600s do a pretty good job at presenting some clear vocals, but because these have the most stark contrast between the mids and the lows and highs, the mids do stand out the most here, making them the most distinguishable. The 23s also do an excellent job of separating the vocals from the rest of the instruments. They have that clear separation like the Sundaras, while having a bit more clarity than the HD600s. However, they do have a bit of a plasticky timbre to the mids that you most likely will get used to if you listen to these for more than 10 minutes at a time. Now the 23s also have that strange timbre in the cellos, unfortunately. They sound their most natural with the HD600, but they exude the most detail and finesse with the Sundaras. It's hard to pick accuracy versus technicality here. Now the upper mids definitely have that slight shine to them with the 23s. You can get used to it, but it's definitely present. The Sundaras bring the mids the most forward and present the recording much like a recording. It sounds very clean and clear, but it lacks that timbre that the HD600s have, which gives orchestral instruments that concert hall effect. Treble. Starting off with sibilance. The HD600s offer the least amount of sibilance. They're basically right at the point where they may start to introduce some, so most people will be unaffected by any sibilance present. The Sundaras are a tad brighter than the HD600, so they do introduce a tad bit of sibilance in the S and the TH, the consonant regions. Nothing terrible though, definitely can get used to it. Then the 23s take this a little bit further than that, and do introduce a tad bit more sibilance, but they also have some really just wacky timbre attached to it. Just, again, very plasticky. I'm not a fan of it. Now, the 23s do offer the highest treble extension and presence, but again, they do so with a slightly honky, fake-sounding timbre. The HD600s are the darkest of the three and offer the least amount of treble extension. But what they do offer sounds the cleanest and has the smoothest sound. The Sundaras are only just a tad airier and offer just slightly higher treble extension than the HD600s. They're not quite as smooth sounding as the HD600s, but they're very close. There is a bit of a peak around the upper treble area that can definitely get on some people's nerves in certain tracks where this area really pops. This can really be heard in tracks like Thunder Horse by Deathclock in just about the entire track. And by the way, side note, they're having their Baby Clock tour right now, and I got tickets and I am stoked about that. I will follow up with you all if you want to hear about that. Anyways, it's that coin rubbing sound that you can feel emanating from within your throat. You can feel it just right back there and just across the entire track. Now me personally, it only gets a tad annoying in 1 or 2% of my tracks. Everywhere else it simply just sounds like more of a quirk rather than a flaw. Sound, stage, and imaging. The HD600s are the most narrow of the bunch, for sure. The Sundaras take it just a bit wider than that, but not by much. Then the 23s are absolutely the widest of the bunch, but they're not really wide as a whole either. I'd classify them as average width. Now as far as imaging goes, I feel that the Sundaras and the HD600s definitely have a leg up on the 23s. Between the HD600 and the Sundara, I'll actually give it to the Sundara because they've got this little extra bit of depth to the sound when it comes to positioning compared to the flatter 2D presentation of the HD600. Now to be fair, the 23s also possess a bit more of that depth than the HD600, but it's still not quite as accurate, which is why I placed them lower in this ranking. Conclusion. Let's wrap up here. The SV023 by Sivga, are definitely a step in the right direction for Sivga, but they're not quite it enough to be considered a valid contender for this particular price point. As time goes by, my HD600 remain my kings of neutrality, but the level of enjoyment I get out of these is slowly starting to dwindle. It really is. If I'm looking for some enjoyment, my money's going to be on my Sundaras at this particular price point. You know, we can go a little above and say like HD 800s for the massive soundstage, Aryas for the fun, punchy, engaging sound signature with just a little bit of spice to it. And yeah, definitely those are great too, but they're way above the price point of these. So if we're sticking to this price point, Sundara, if you want a little more bass, you tune that up with some EQ. The deeper bass extension makes them more solid contenders for electronic music. The slightly shimmery high end makes them so silvery and enjoyable without going overboard. And last but not least, their adaptability to EQ makes them great for a little bit of modifying too. If what I'm looking for is an editing, monitoring, mixing headphone, like listening to the audio for this video, or if I'm just craving some reference sound, I'll still reach for my HD600s and absolutely love listening to them too. Anyway, that's gonna conclude my video. I know I've been taking a while and I apologize for that, but a little more things coming my way, things that I personally want to do with my own money, my own resources, and my own tech, stuff that I actually want to try out on my own. But anyway, that's going to do it for today's comparison. Thank you very much for watching. I really hoped this helped you in some way, shape, or form. And until now, see you in the next video. Okay, ciao.